Admiral Zira was positioned in the center of the Galactic Order's sprawling activities focus. His gaze was fixed on the hologram exhibit that created a calm atmosphere. The spectacle playing out in front of him was the remains of the outpost. Unthinkable. Alpha was smoking in the wreckage. Previously the pride of the outpost's defensive network of the Federation, but that was the assailants' work, not the shock. Human ships are sleek, dark, and black. With ruthlessness and accuracy, the people were meant to be unimportant, centered on peaceful development rather than war. We lost an admiral capable of this. Communication with 2 additional stations was lost. The people are striking everything, and the voice of the officer cut through the dense, disbelieving air. Zaris didn't react right away. His intellect elevated, attempting to interpret the circumstances. Why would anybody do that? How could they? Recalling the reports and the infinite data that had appeared on his desk throughout the years. Indeed, humans were a growing species, but this was something completely different. The utter insolence of it. It nods at him, igniting an underlying uneasiness that wasn't appropriate for a leader of his stature. The officer applied his skills. Zaris turned, his voice straining with panic, his typically composed manner hardening. "Bring up the closest fleet so I can get a look." Now, in the operations center, their movements holographic, humming with frenzied activity. Officers shouted orders as the screens changed. Additionally, the piercing sound of scanners filled the air, but none of that mattered. The reality altered. Humans were attacking, and they were victorious. The screen flickered once. More. Displaying additional human ships from devastation, disassembling a defense relay. Every surgical strike was accurate, at a level that required years of instruction and proficiency with technology. Mastery of the type that the galactic Earth had never been given command over. "Our defense mechanisms, sir, are useless," another officer reported. "The humans have circumvented all of it, as if they are fully aware of where to hit." Zaris's eyes squinted, yet his calmness remained. In his voice, the tension was evident. "How are they handling this?" "Admiral, I don't know," the officer replied. "Our scanners can scarcely detect their ships. We can't find them till they're directly above us." Zaris's fists clenched at his sides. "This is not your typical assault. They're attacking our posts, destroying us one by one from the inside." He halted, his voice growing gloomy. "But why do they have nothing to gain?" Another officer responded. In reality, nobody had an answer across the stars. On the bridge of the Cache Road, Earth's most sophisticated warship, the crew moved silently, working efficiently and rapidly at every stage of the attack. There had been no space for error, sir. "We've reached the next target, Theta's outpost." "Is down," one of his officers said. Rose nodded to Kurt. "Well, keep the schedule up to date," RHS responded. His tone was cool, almost icy. He understood the force of their actions. Striking first, abruptly going against all of humanity's diplomatic instincts grown over many ages, although there was no other option now. The secret had arrived. Came in bits and pieces. Whispers of a scheme within the command of the galaxy to bring Earth to its knees, to conquer mankind in 10 years. They hadn't bided their time until the axe fell. Another report arrived. Lieutenant Adra, second in command, spoke. "The Galactic Command seems confused. They're still attempting to determine what's going on." RHS quietly breathed, his chest beginning to relax. That was the crucial component of surprise in combat. It was frequently the most important weapon, and they were pleasantly surprised. "We'll move the object to keep them off balance. Fleet to the next target, without any delays." He paused, her eyes darting. "Do you believe they'll ever comprehend the rationale behind our actions?" RHS glimpsed her face softening briefly. "They will, in a moment. But by the time they do, it will be too late." Silent, those words settled over the crew, and everyone was aware of what was involved. They weren't merely fighting for their own, Existence, but for Earth itself, always seen as a backwater planet, immature enough to not really represent a threat. Their advantage had been overestimated. Years of planning had concealed innovations in technology, and one pivotal moment had led them to this point. RHS observed the screen as his fleet ships positioned themselves, an example of Earth's inventiveness and cunning systems, going against the grain, quantum-based weapons for detection, avoiding even the most sophisticated shields. For many years, the Galactic Command was unaware of what was about to happen. Admiral Zira gazed intently at the tactical chart. His thoughts raced, and something was very wrong. This wasn't just a skirmish, it was deliberate, planned devastation. People weren't responding. Instead, they were vanishing. He never thought Earth might lead with such brutality. Admiral, the human vessels are no longer visible on our scanners. The officer at the sensor station stated again. We are unable to monitor them. Zaras's jaw clenched in anticipation. We must stop the defense fleet before they arrive in the central systems if we want to preserve our last line of defense. Zaras's mind raced, thinking, how had they overlooked this? They had undervalued humanity. There had to be more to this. Absolutely more than first glanced. There was something hiding just below the surface. Back on board, RHS stood by the window, unflappable, gazing into space's immensity. His reflection gave him a sharp gaze in return, unwavering. This was not the conflict they desired, but they had to fight the war. General, be ready for the next step, Adra spoke softly. Let's get this done, Admiral. Zaras paced the operations center, his chest twisted tightly with stress. Each frontline update gave them the worst news. Their spacecraft slipping through defense grids and galactic instructions. Ghostly outposts that should have been unaffected were dropping in just hours. He paused at the main screen, narrowing his eyes. The fading emblems of their once potent fleets were all that remained. There was no logic, no pattern to the approach. Humans merely launched vicious attacks. Efficiently, an officer said from behind him in Sector 7. What if Zaras doesn't turn? They're on their way with reinforcements, but they're hesitant and won't get there in time. Zaras tightened his hands. The desperate potentialities flashed before him. He had spent decades constructing this defense system, observing each significant. Installation now resting amid the ruins where they should have been. Be ready for anything. Except this. Commander AAC, his second in command, neared with a grim expression. The Council is requesting an explanation. They are unable to comprehend how we might be losing. Zaras was taken by surprise and gazed at the map of 1,000 ideas interacting with each other. We greatly underestimated Earth. It's evident, but there's more. He spoke softly, as though reluctant to acknowledge. For real, they're striking us with a precision we've never seen before. It's as though they've been observing us for years, researching all our system's vulnerabilities. Zaras sharpened his eyes. What are you suggesting? The younger officer gulped. I believe they've been getting ready for this much longer than anticipated. Zaras's chest tightened. Could it be true? Had Earth seen their facade of superiority and prepared for this covert assault? If that were the case, it was more than just a miscalculation. It was carelessness. He exhaled deeply. The people posed a greater threat than any of them had pictured. RHS stood on the brink of the indomitable, hands behind his back, watching the battlefield stretch out before him. His focus shifted, weighed down by the choices he'd made in recent days. There was no more space for uncertainty now that they'd committed fully to this course. General, Lieutenant Adra said from her station, every target in Sector 7 is eliminated. The next set of coordinates is locked. RHS gave a brief nod. Move forward, and we'll keep them off balance. Adra went back to her duty, her expression grim. The ship's engines hummed, rising, unwaveringly ready for the next stage. The viewport extended indefinitely in front of him. and in the distance, a fresh day was breaking on the battlefield. Though the conflict had only just begun, the antiseptic, chilly light of the future awaited. "Not like this," Zaris muttered to himself. "Not like this." The war room for Galactic Command flashed and sank with the air's high level of tension. Admiral Zira was in the middle, seeing a strategic demonstration of the battlefield. His thoughts were racing. The fleet was fragmented and dispersed. Images on the screen showed that whenever they attempted to reassemble, the human vessels would emerge out of thin air, obliterating crucial moments before disappearing once more. This wasn't warfare, though. It was Admiral Commander AX's demolition. His thoughts were interrupted by a voice that pulled him back, returning him to the chamber where the council was requesting an update. Zaris did not respond. He instantly maintained his focus on the show, his fist clenched around the console's edge. He had to make sense of this. Humans weren't supposed to do this, possess the ability to be so precise in the tactical use of premeditated violence. They had an advantage because they were in charge. "Tell them we're evaluating our choices," he said in a voice even, despite the storm. "There is no more dialogue until we obtain something concrete." AEC nodded after hesitating. Zaris moved, aside seeing that humans didn't want to acknowledge it. They were triumphant in each strategic reaction. Every move they had practiced had collapsed in the face of Earth's advance. They had been ready for a conventional engagement, but this was a very different situation. He flipped to his console and brought up the information on the new weapon systems on Earth. Something had to be explained, though it might be rebutted. His gaze swept over the claims that advanced quantum weapons and cloaking devices could get around even the most sophisticated shields. But there was more than just the technology. Something more brutal and strategic. Admiral's call was unexpected, but it returned with renewed vigor. "We've intercepted them." Zaris's heart straightened upon hearing this. Throbbing in his chest, he gestured for the